Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. Momentarily, I will be joined by Alex Bennett, and we'll be discussing working in restaurants. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies, to nonprofits as well as high net worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Alex, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me here. It's an honor to be here.
It's my pleasure. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
My name is Alex Bennett. I've been working in restaurants for over 35 years now. At one point, my family owned one, and I say by my mid-20s, I was that place. So I got a good idea what it takes to run a business and what it takes to run a restaurant. But over the years since then, I kind of settled in and just became a full-time professional bartender. I say I'm a career bartender now. But in those years, I did write a book. It's actually the first of a trilogy. It's called the trilogy is called The Old Rosie Chronicles, and the first book is called The Shot of Okies.
I've had many clients come to me for career counseling, from fresh out of college to retirees. And on occasion, someone will come to me fresh out of college, and I'll look at their resume, and I'll be kind of surprised that they didn't have a job during high school. So I'll ask them about it, and they say, oh, no, I had a job, but they told me not to include it on their resume. And I asked them what the job was. Well, I worked in a restaurant. I waited tables. One was a hostess. And I said, no, you include it. There are a lot of great skills that you learn working in a restaurant. You learn math.
Oh, yeah.
You learn how to deal with difficult people, customer service.
Very much so.
You learn how to concentrate, holding the tray.
Oh, yeah.
And they put it on, and the employers like to see that.
Oh, yeah.
Why would you think, or why do you think, if you think, that working in a restaurant has a bad connotation or a bad reputation?
Well, there's a stigma to it that you're just a bartender, or just a server, and it's not a job that you can have a career out of, or you can support a family with, or something like that, or just be a professional. And the things you touched on are right on. The amount of different characteristics or traits that you pick up working in restaurants. It's dealing with people. I mean, not just difficult people, but people you enjoy seeing too. It's building clientele. It's building relationships. I'm lucky to have a lot of regulars, very successful in a lot of different businesses, and one of the things they always tell me, the thing they always have in common that they tell me is that you got to focus on building relationships. If you focus on building relationships, the money will come. And that's in restaurants. That's the integral part of the job. You want to build a regular staff. People walk in, even if you're the hostess, you see them, you smile at them, you see them again and again and again. Oh, I got your table ready, and all that sort of thing. You build relationships, and that's a skill that you learn. Another thing is, yes, the math, but also multitasking. You can have 6, 7, 8 tables going at one time, and you're in the weeds, and you got to figure out how to maintain your calm, maintain your cool, not let everybody see how anxious you are, and keep going and stay focused. And, you get through the shift and you learn strategies to teach yourself. I tell everybody, man, when we're in the thick of it, hey, man, it's going to end. We got about an hour of this left. So you just got to get through it. Just handle what's in front of you and keep going right on down the line. But it's also, it's teaching people. It's a lot. It's hard for me to describe exactly all this stuff that you learn. And the biggest thing I'll tell you to anybody out there that's watching, if you have worked in a restaurant, if there's somebody that's interviewing you that also worked in a restaurant, they're going to automatically know that you know these skills. They're going to know that you're better at them than everybody else. So I would absolutely include any restaurant experience on your resume, because the other people that have worked in them are going to go, okay, I can trust this person dealing with customer service.
I belonged for a number of years to, I think it was called the Midtown Executive Club, which was a lobby of a fancy schmancy hotel in Manhattan. It looked like a large living room. There were 2 computers that members could use. It was also the waiting area for the restaurant.
Mm.
There was a bar there. Now, I don't drink. I became friendly with the bartender. And one day he said to me, would you like your regular drink? And I said, yeah. Okay. And he goes, 1 virgin scotch and water coming right up.
There you go.
I thought it was hysterical.
I'm going to borrow that line, to be honest with you, but go
It's
ahead.
yours, take it. I saw him dealing with people of all ilks.
Mm-hmm.
And he could just go from one to the other. But one day, and it was the only time in all the years that I was there was a drunk. There
Oh,
was
okay.
a woman who was drunk. And there was no question about it. And she was acting inappropriately. And he was able to calm her down and get her to go upstairs to her room. How do you deal with difficult people?
Well, okay. If I'm in the situation where a person's obviously intoxicated, then I'm going to stop them and I'm going to say, look, I can't serve you anymore. I'm looking out for you in your best interest. I got to look out for my best interest. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. I don't want anything bad to happen to me. So it's going to be better for both of us if, we don't serve you any more alcohol. I can give you water, or get you some food or some coffee or something like that. Now, when it comes to dealing with somebody who's just difficult, the thing I'm always going to do is I'm going to converse with people. I say bartending is more about chatting than it is about making drinks. And I'm going to try to get to know them, and one of the best ways that you kind of get around a lot of people's guard is, you ask about family. Everybody likes talking about their kids or their grandkids or whatever it is. And so if there's somebody that's coming in and I know that this person can be troublesome, let's just say that, one of the first questions that's going to come out of my mouth is, hey, how's the kids, or how's the family, or if I know that they have a person who's close to them who might be sick or have surgery or something, how they doing? And you relate to somebody on an empathetic level. And that usually, kind of sets them, it lowers their guard, it lowers their I don't know, I guess hostility maybe is the best word I could say for it. And then you become more of their friend. They respect you as a person, because I think that's the key to a lot of this. They have to know that you respect them. They also have to respect you. And the number one way that I found to earn people's respect is really to empathize with them.
Now, as I said, I don't drink. I had a hangover once when I was 10 years old. Too much wine Passover, and
Okay.
don't want to do that again. So I don't drink. I grew up in Canada, in Ontario. And in Ontario, we have what's called the Ontario the Liquor Control Board. And there are agents that go into bars to make sure that everything is being done properly. And there was this hotel where we would go to, and we were friendly with the bartender and with the maitre d' and what have you. And he told me to sit by the bar. I forget why I was there in the afternoon, but I was there in the afternoon. I think my father had some dealings with the owner. And he knew that there was an agent from the Liquor Control Board there.
Okay.
And he said, here, let me make you your zombie. And he poured all the fruit juice in, did not put in the rum.
Yep.
And sure enough, within, I took a sip of it, and I remember how awful it was. It was just too sweet.
Yeah.
And the agent came over and he said, what did you just prepare for him? And I looked at him and it said, zombie. I was answering for the bartender. And then he said, here, have a taste. And then he realized that he was, the bartender there had set him up. But that always got me, I've always remembered that.
Yeah.
How much of bartending, I don't think that's the right word, but what I mean is of making cocktails, making drinks, is simple chemistry.
It's a good question. When it comes to making drinks or mixology or whatever they call it, I always say you want to know if a bartender's a good bartender, have them make you either a martini, a Manhattan, or an old fashioned. Those are the basic drinks, the basic cocktails have been around forever, and from there, you kind of learn everything else. But once you have those down, then it gets easy to expand. And when you're back behind the bar and you're making a lot of drinks and you're making, one of the places I worked at is a corporate restaurant. We constantly were updating our cocktail list. So you're constantly being exposed to a lot of different alcohols, a lot of different mixers and stuff like that. And as you learn, then you go, okay, like Frangelico is nutty, so that's going to add a nutty flavor to anything. Saint Germain is like an elderberry, so it's like florally. So that's going to add that sort of texture or that sort of composition to any drink. And so it's like anything else, if you're a cook, you learn the basic sort of recipes, but then you start picking up different ways to season them and different ways to prepare things, and you come up with completely different dishes. And it's kind of the same with bartending. You learn the basics, and then from there, you add a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and as you learn it, it becomes easier to know more. I guess it would be like a chemist, where you start by mixing a few of the elements together, and then you see the reaction, and then, well, what happens if we add a little of this, or what happens if we add a little of that? And I say that's where a lot of cocktails come from. You get bartenders behind a bar that gets bored. We get creative. So let's try making this drink with a little of this or a little of that or whatever else. And like the place that I work at now, it's an independent. We can kind of make up our own drinks, and we came up with a brown sugar old fashioned. And it's brown sugar infused simple syrup and cocoa bitters. So it's a little twist. Now, people have loved it. We did it as a holiday cocktail, and we never put it on our menu, but it outsells every other drink by a 2-to-1 margin, just because people come in and go, I want that brown sugar old fashioned. I want that brown sugar old fashioned. And that's kind of what we became known for. But that's, I guess, to answer your question, that's kind of how it works. You learn the basics, and then, you kind of grow from there. And now I'm to the point, if somebody comes in and says, I had this cocktail somewhere, this is what it tastes like. If I can't make exactly that, I can make something pretty close.
You mentioned martinis. There's something I've always been curious about, and it's obvious where I'm getting this from. What is the difference between shaken and stirred?
Okay, so this debate goes back a couple hundred years. Now, the first martini recipe, and there's a backstory to martinis, I can get into that too, but to save time, the first martini recipe actually called for it shaken with 2 ice cubes. Now, the ice cubes back then were big and square, because that's how they came. Now, at the time and over time, most cocktails were actually stirred or mixed. So it was very different to do it that way. And martinis then became known to be stirred and not shaken. That all changed in the 1950s with James Bond, because he ordered it shaken and not stirred. And so that kind of created the craze. Now, here's the difference essentially. When you shake a cocktail with ice, you're doing 2 things. You're breaking up the ice chips, so you're chilling it almost immediately, but you're also diluting it. Where if you stir it, you are chilling it, but you're not really diluting it. And so there's going to be more of a punch if you stir it and not shake it. Now, there's a debate going on, what's better, what's worse, this and that. And what I always say to any bartender is, hey man, make it to your customers, make it to the guests, in different regions of the country. Like I'm on the south side of Chicago. You better shake that martini because that's what they expect. But there's other regions of the country that I know you better stir it because that's what they expect. And so that's kind of the way I just kind of adapt to it. But that's, if you want to get into that's kind of the story, the backstory before it. And yes, we have James Bond to thank for shaken drinks.
Okay. What does it take to be a successful restaurant employee?
The number one thing that I'm going to say that it takes is just to be able to, again, build relationships with the people that come in. When people come in, even if you're having a bad day, no matter what you found out, if you showed up to work, man, you got to leave it at the door and you got to make them feel welcome. You got to make them feel like, you want to be there because that's what's going to make them want to be there. A successful restaurant owner will look at their business like this. The guest is the most important person in the building. The second most important person is either the server or the bartender, the people who are dealing with the guests. Because if the server and the bartender are happy, well, then the guest is going to be happy. They're going to go out of their way to keep the guest happy. And then it goes up to chain of command to where the owner is actually, in a lot of ways, the least important person in the restaurant. Because if they actually have a successful restaurant, it's running itself. And they don't really have to do anything. They just got to kind of stay out of everybody's way. And that is what I always say is the key to it. You build your relationship with your people, and that comes from the top down or the bottom up, however you want to look at it, to where, if the relationships within the restaurant are good, the restaurant's going to be successful. People are going to want to come back, and they're going to keep coming back. They're going to keep coming back. They're going to keep coming back because everybody wants, they want cheers. They want everybody to know their name. They want to feel like home when they walk in the door.
Tell us about your book.
Right. So with my book, I play the history of whiskey, actually, bourbon specifically. Now, whiskey goes back 1,000 years to Britain, and whiskey's grain alcohol. Barley's the native grain, and that's why the Scots and the Irish started making whiskey out of barley way back when. Now, during the age of exploration, everywhere they went, they'd find a native grain, and they'd start making whiskey out of it. So when they got to America, corn's native to America, and they started making whiskey out of corn. That was the first step in making bourbon. Now, the second one came about when at the time, everything was shipped in one barrel.
So it's basically a vegetable.
Well, it's grain, I mean, it depends on how technical you want to get.
Health food.
But health food. Yeah, you call it that. Yep. But the barrels then started to become important because they didn't age it in barrels back in the day because you couldn't trust water. So they couldn't leave it in there. It was going to get consumed right away. But then they started making barrels out of white American oak, and they'd fill those up and they realized, wow, man, this is great. And then the third thing that came about was that, you had your white American oak barrel, they'd be filled with pickles or herring or crabs. You can imagine how that might affect the taste. So they started charring out the inside to get rid of those lingering flavors and odors and realize, wow, man, we really got something. But it's a very murky history, and I can play with it. And I go back to 1743, and I have a young Scotswoman in America who wants to make whiskey. And so she's kind of stumbling on that process of making bourbon. And at the same time, there's an Irish pirate. Every time she hears about an English ship that has a barrel of her Okies aboard, she seizes it, she accuses the captain of smuggling, and she executes him. And you know how guys are. The more dangerous something is, the more we're going to want it. So as her legend grows, the stories cross the Atlantic, and they reach a pirate hunter who's fighting a war in Europe. And I always say, if you want to find out what happens next, well, then you got to read the book.
You got to read the book. What's the difference between, I don't know if the word's brewing, but let's just use brewing, alcohol. I don't care if it's beer, scotch, bourbon, whatever, in wood versus metal?
Oh, man, you're getting into another debate. Now, a lot of wines are made, they were traditionally, everything was made in wood. The stills would be made out of metal. But when you, okay, to back up a little bit, if you're going to make whiskey, you're going to start by basically making beer, a big vat of beer, and then you distill it. And then, as you distill it, you take the alcohol out of it. It's the same with cognac or brandy. Then you're starting with wine, and you would make that beer or that wine in a wooden vat, and then it'd go into the still, which would be metal, because obviously you're heating it up. Now, there's a lot of debate on whether or not, wine can be fermented or beer can be fermented in the metal tanks. And a lot of them are. I mean, most of the mass produced stuff is going to be made in metal tanks or metal containers. But the wood, especially with wine, will affect the taste a lot of times, because it is going to pick up a lot of the residual flavors from the wood. Now, with beer, I don't know how much it would affect it, but I know there's a lot of beers now that they make that they age it in a bourbon cask. So they take old bourbon barrels and they fill it with beer, and then they'll age it in the bourbon cask, and it'll pick up a lot of those residual flavors. So, I don't think either one of them's right or wrong, because it's a matter of palate. It depends on what you like. If you want to taste some, like a lot of Chardonnays are still made in a wooden vat, and they're aged or whatever in wooden barrels. And so it's going to have that woody flavor. And if you like that, stick with it, but I also tell people, try everything, keep an open mind. That's kind of the fun of a lot of that stuff. You get the different flavors from different things, and you can enjoy it all.
The only debate about alcohol that I have ever personally witnessed and was asked to be the deciding vote, so I have had a little bit of alcohol, is beer.
Okay.
Glass bottle or tin can?
Again, they have been studies and everything else involved in it. I think it comes down to price. What do you want to pay for the case? Do you want to pay $15 or you want to pay 30? And I don't think either one of them necessarily keeps them colder. I think if you take a can of beer and pour it in a glass, it's going to be pretty much the same as a bottle. So I don't know. I guess being around it for so long, having served so much of it, and drank quite a bit myself, I don't really particularly have a preference between either one.
Just for the record, I broke the tie saying that the glass tasted better.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
They asked me why, and I said, the tin tastes tinny.
Okay. Fair enough.
Now, I may have been prejudiced because the first thing I drank was the glass.
Okay.
But I don't know. Anyways, grapes. What's the difference between grapes? What's the big deal? Why isn't a grape a grape?
Well, so when it comes to wine, if you think of it like, trying to think like tomatoes, we have cherry tomatoes, we have the big,
Whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Beef tomatoes.
Beef tomatoes. Thank you. Grapes are kind of the same way, and different grapes grow better in different soils at different altitudes, in different temperatures, with different amount of rain. When you see the vintage, and I have some customers that very much know their wine, and they'll look at one and go, yeah, 2018, that was no good, but 2016, that's a completely different story. And it's because of the amount of precipitation that came down. And so those grapes ripened in a certain way that was much better than it was the other year, because it either had too much rain or too little rain or whatever it was. And that's kind of where you get a lot of the different varieties from. Plus, different countries of the world, grapes are specific to the growing areas. And so that's why you get so many variations of wine. In Spain, which is going to be, a hotter, kind of drier climate, you get the Tempranillo grape. I think that's how it's pronounced. And we're in France, where it's going to be more wet and more, cooler and a lot more water. You get the Bordeaux grapes or the Cab grapes, and so, and it just, grapes are like, they're like any other vegetable, man. And you can, there's a million different kinds of corn out there. A lot of people don't realize it, but that's the case too. And that's kind of the way it is with grapes.
Right, the grapes are fruit, so you get fruit from wines, and you get your whiskeys from vegetables.
Pretty much. Yep.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, it is illegal to refer to a Burgundy as a Burgundy unless it comes from the Burgundy area of
Yeah,
France, the same for Champagne.
Shane saying
Are there
yes.
any US wines that are similarly protected?
I don't know of any US wines, but bourbon is. So for something to be truly considered bourbon, now there's Japanese bourbons out there and they call it bourbon and they make it to bourbon specifications, but truly for it to be considered bourbon, it has to be made in America. Doesn't not specific to any state necessarily, but it does have to be made in America. But you know, there is a very good reason for a lot of this. You know, Champagne, and this was about 20 years ago now. I read an article where, you know, you have the Champagne region of France, and there was a bunch of acres around the region that they were considering incorporating into the region. So that way the Champagne makers could grow the grapes there as well. And they said that those acres of land were going to, if that were to happen, they were going to go from being $500 an acre to like 50,000 an acre. So that's part of the reason why a lot of those things are so protected, because, you know, there's such a huge price difference or value assigned to those regions. In a sense, Prosecco, which is sparkling wine coming out of Italy, and Champagne, which is sparkling wine coming out of France, are the same thing. It's just different areas.
I was once at this club that I belonged to. The bartender introduced me to this very nice gentleman who was, I believe the term is an enophile, an expert on wine,
Okay.
collector of wines.
Okay.
And he immediately said, now Bruce doesn't know anything from wine. It's fine. So we had a nice conversation, and he invited me to his home for a wine tasting.
Okay.
And the condition was that I had to bring with me a unique bottle of wine. Okay. So I go to a wine store, a liquor store, and I asked them for I said, I'd explain it to them. I said, need a unique bottle of wine. And he's bringing out all this stuff, and I don't know if it's unique or not. And then I see one bottle that I know this guy has never had before. He's never seen it before, probably, and he hasn't tasted it before. A bottle of Manischewitz Concord grape wine.
Okay.
Which is a bottle that is actually squared.
Oh, okay.
It have a normal neck, and the
Yeah.
body is a square. Now, I don't know how it is in the south side of Chicago, but in the south side of New Jersey, you can't carry a bottle of liquor without having it in a bag.
Okay.
Okay. So I arrive at his house and I said, you told me I had to bring a unique bottle of wine. This, I believe, is a unique bottle of wine. I handed it to him. He said, I've never seen this before. What is it? Well, it's a kosher wine. It's sweet. Children like it. It's not that you can get drunk. And I told him the story that I mentioned. But you will find it unique. Well, let's put it this way. I was never invited back. All right. Very nice people, very polite, but wasn't for me. And I wasn't for them. I mean, I had nothing wrong with it. But I did ask one intelligent question. Because for a time I collected antiquarian books. I don't do it anymore.
Okay.
And nobody should bother to break into my apartment because there aren't any here, regrettably. I said, when you buy a first edition, it could be worth $100. If it's autographed, it could be worth $200. But it'll only be worth $100,000 if it has the dust cover.
Hmm.
And the dust cover is in perfect condition. So I asked him, if you are collecting wine, are you collecting the liquid? Are you collecting the bottle? Or are you collecting the label? And they all thought about it, and they said the label.
Yeah.
Why?
I
Peter?
Okay, so that's a whole nother world. You know, I say like wine, watches, art, guns. There is a whole world of collectibles in there that most of us have no idea about. And wine is a very big one to where, you know, you get bottles of wine that are 150 years old, you know, you have no idea if they're still good. You have no idea what they would if they were even tasted good when they were made way back when. But you know, it's like kind of like a baseball card. You know, you see that old Mickey Mantle from the 1950s. You're going, wow, that's really cool. And you see that label, man, and you know, especially if it's something that you know exists, that you know is hard to get, and all of a sudden you got your hands on one. I think there's that little child feeling of, wow, man, I got it. And it doesn't matter if it tastes good, because you're probably not going to taste it anyway, you know. And it doesn't matter what bottle it's in, because that's the bottle was put in way back when anyway. So it becomes a, you know, almost like an ego thing to where, hey, man, I got something that nobody else has.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what goes to it. And, you know, the label is, you know, you rip off a label of a bottle of wine. Well, what do you got, man? You got a big bottle of fermented fruit juice. You know, I mean, let's face it. And how much difference of a taste is there going to be between a really good one made last year and a really good one made 200 years ago? But, you know, that label, that makes the difference.
You don't know if you're opening up a bottle of old vinegar or old grape juice.
Yeah.
I want to put up your contact information.
Okay.
Make us magically appear.
All right.
And my last question for you is, was there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
You know, the only thing I guess I could think of is where to get the book, which, you know, you can get it on online. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the Exhibitor's website. That's my publisher's website. And you can always, you know, I say if you're in the South Side of Chicago, you can reach out to me on Literary Booze. I'll tell you where I'm working and when I'm working, and you can come into the bar and see me there. I'll be happy to sell you one and sign it.
Well, Alex, this has been very interesting. I enjoyed it because I enjoy learning things that I know nothing about. And this has been informative and entertaining. And I thank you profusely.
Oh, no, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been an honor to be here. It's been a blast.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.